Welcome back to this third segment of this episode of the Are We OK podcast, where we're going to talk about the leader of the opposition, Hamzah Zainuddin's interview on BFM radio that was not too long ago, at the end of September, and then we saw it on YouTube a couple of weeks back. And I wanted to highlight this because not many people, I think, probably including yourself, Peter, would be familiar with Hamzah Zainuddin as a member of parliament, and maybe not so aware, unless you are an avid watcher of parliamentary TV, that, you know, of his performance as the leader of the opposition. Just wanted to get your early impressions, but before we go into that, were you familiar with who this guy was, Hamzah Zainuddin?
For me, he was rather a stranger to me for quite a long time until the whole PN episode came up. Then he became the sec-gen. Then suddenly you see this guy, they said he's well respected and all and stuff like that lah. So I suppose I made a guess was that he's one of those guys working at the background for a very long time, follow orders,
backroom kind of guy,
backroom kind of guy, you know. And then eventually there's this spot where you're not threatening enough to put you there, and then I scared that you overthrow me, but you're also not so lousy that you can't carry the flag. So you're in that position, sweet spot kind of guy. Yep. So that was my impression of him, because every time we made a statement as well, especially during those times when they were fighting for the government position, he made quite reasonable and I would say well thought of statements, right, that made him look like a very well-mannered, trustable leader, one of the more dependable guys in PN in that sense.
Sure. So Hamzah Zainuddin is the MP for Larut in Perak. He's also the Secretary General of Bersatu and also Secretary General of Perikatan Nasional. Somebody who's trusted by Muhyiddin, and was given the responsibility of being the leader of the opposition over and above a PAS MP, because I think PAS, even though they have more MPs than Bersatu, they felt it was more suitable for maybe somebody more experienced with both, especially on the government side and on knowing the people in PKR and UMNO, because he was formerly UMNO, to be the leader of the opposition, right? So I think as the leader of the opposition, he has done his parliamentary duties quite well, wanting to defend the cohesiveness of Perikatan Nasional within the Dewan. But I think in terms of his sort of like more policy-oriented kind of discussions and substance, I think that one is largely been missing so far. And I think that was probably reflected a little bit on the in the BFM interview as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I have to say that after I watched the BFM interview, I felt he could have done better, like the issues that we were talking about and so on.
Where were some of the gaps, you think?
Well, I think firstly, the way that they have talked about the MOU, I think the first thing was that when he said that the MOU was a secret, you're not allowed to talk about it, the secrecy thing. I was like, oh wow, okay. Then I feel this like, okay, I feel you, PN, Then later when he came out with the next statement, which was, he talked about how this did not respect the Constitution. Shazana Mokhtar actually mentioned that, no, I disagree, because there were
Article
other
8
areas
on equality and all that, yeah.
That's right. And then he kept defending on that, right? And then when she poked him further, he kind of did not really answer a lot of questions, in my opinion. For example, when the first question itself, like, why is not usually the opposition leader is the likely PM candidate? He didn't quite answer that question as well. Then later when asked about why they disagree with this and why they do not want to have a conversation about it with the current government, he also gave very vague answers that in a way made, in my opinion, almost made them look a bit petty lah.
Petty, maybe don't have a bigger vision.
That's right, yeah.
And I'll give you a specific example since you mentioned the MOU. And his position, which is consistent with Perikatan Nasional's position, was to say that the MOU says we can't discuss things with regards to, I'm paraphrasing lah, race and religion. He uses that to say that it is against the Constitution because, the MOU says that if you go against certain preconditions or understanding that, there's a certain amount of equality that's recognized in the law and in the Constitution, that is going against the MOU. To bring that to sort of like a position where I can't talk about Malay rights because of the MOU, I think that's a poor way of framing it, because I encourage our listeners to go and listen to the interview on YouTube, and we'll put it on the show notes, the links. Shazana Mokhtar, the host from BFM, actually says, look, I disagree with that premise, because Article 8 says there's equality in the law, eyes of the law. Notwithstanding, there's also Article 153 that talks about certain Malay privileges, right? So if I was in his position, and I've read the details of the MOU, because it was published in different forms, and snippets of it was made known in the press as well, I would have approached it from the perspective that there are not enough institutional safeguards within the MOU. To say, for example, the MOU can be terminated if the conditions of the MOU are found to be broken. Who decides when the conditions have been broken? Is it something that is can be decided on a unilateral basis? If, let's say, the PM decides, then the MOU is off, right? So those are the kind of things where I would have asked.
It's more substantial.
More substantial. You would have asked for some sort of a committee or some sort of body. It can be within the parliament. It can be retired judges who can make some sort of a decision on whether the terms and conditions of the MOU have been violated or not. So that's one. Another thing would be to say that, look, by putting in these very general conditions in terms of what we cannot say or can say, you're actually restricting our freedom of speech. Right, to talk about different issues of national importance. I won't go down the track to say that this is against the Constitution because we cannot talk about Malay rights. That is, I think, something that's only focusing on one particular community.
That's right.
Right? And he makes no bones about it. He doesn't make any apologies. What he's saying in this interview is that we meaning Perikatan Nasional, still have strong support among the Malay community, and they are the majority in the country. But as some of the recent by-elections have shown in Nenggiri in Kelantan or in Mahkota in Johor, you cannot just depend on the votes of the Malay voters, and even in some cases, they cannot win the majority of the Malay voters.
That's right.
Right? So if you really want to sort of like expand your base, you should come up with a message that's more substantive, that goes away from your traditional reactionary 3R kind of narrative. Right? So, we began this episode talking about the PM not being able to put positive narratives using good examples of different people speaking and using Malay. I think in this case, Hamzah is not able to put a positive narrative for why PN is better than the current government in terms of leading the country forward.
Yep.
And one of the reasons, he admitted himself, is because they are not used to being in the opposition.
Yes.
Right?
You mentioned that.
Yes. I mean, there are a lot of people inside there who were former ministers, deputy ministers, right? And he says that they are experienced enough, which I agree with, but they are not using the experience to come up with these kinds of more acceptable critiques and give counter examples or counter suggestions to what the government is trying to speak about. And Shazana even pointed out, in an interview, that many people see people like Khairi Jamaluddin and Shahril Hamdan doing a better job in terms of being a check and balance on the government compared to the actual opposition, right?
I have to say that's very true. So I think he's getting more coverage than Parliament itself. Yeah.
So after listening to Hamzah's interview, you probably are not surprised that the opposition isn't really getting that much traction, especially in the policy space, correct? Yeah. And if I were to take sort of like a further note, what he says about there being a lot of people who are experienced in government applies more to the former UMNO MPs who are in Bersatu now, and some of the current Bersatu MPs, right? Less so on the PAS side, because PAS there are a lot of new MPs, and those who have been ministers and deputy ministers, they were only there after the Sheraton move for a period of slightly more than 2 years. So I think this shows again to me the focus is very much on Bersatu and their leadership. And it's interesting to note, with their party elections, drawing to a close, no fight, no contestation for the top 2 posts. There are some on the VP side, but the heavy hitters, I think, will win, and we can talk about that when the results are out. It was interesting that Wan Saiful, the Tasik Lugo MP, Bersatu as well, came out with a statement to say that the era of relying on UMNO protest votes is over, right? Meaning that Bersatu and Perikatan Nasional have to come out with a more substantive policy narrative in order to show the voters from different communities that they are indeed ready to take over as government in the next election. In order to try to and use that as a platform to try to win more support.
My question is,